T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Kush'S Korner here on the Trap Talk Reptile Network, the coolest reptile network in the world. Tonight, just a solo episode, just me alone. I have two different topics to discuss. The first one will be the discussion of free-handling venomous snakes, one of much contention over a long period of time. And I personally think that there's a way that we can end the discussion once and for all. I'm going to be going over that. Secondly, I'll be talking about the importance of scarcity in the reptile industry, of keeping things special. I think that we have lost that as a whole for a lot of different reasons. So I'm going to go over kind of why I think this has happened and what we can do to fix it. But before we get into the show, as always, USARC. So USARC is the organization that is fighting for our rights to keep our reptiles, to run our reptile businesses, and to pursue this means of life. Check out usarc.org for all of the relevant information you need to know about the organization. And if you are not already a member, please check out becoming a USARC member. As a community, we have strength in numbers, and the more people that are behind the cause, the better. And tonight we are brought to you by Juggernaut Reptiles, one of the leaders in the blood python and short-tail python game. They're not limited just to those species, though. They also do ball pythons, green anacondas, a number of other species, but definitely one of the leaders in the blood python and short-tail python world. So check out Juggernaut Reptiles on all forms of social media to check out what they got going on. And we are also brought to you by Mark Hager of Texas Chondros. So Mark is one of the leaders in the designer green tree python community. He has been doing this for a very long time and has some of the best snakes in the game. Not only is he a great breeder and a great person, but he also runs one of my personal favorite Instagram accounts, the Texas Chondros Instagram page, where he not only features his own snakes, but green tree pythons from keepers all across the great state of Texas. Once again, for all of your green tree python needs, check out Texas Chondros. And last but not least, we are brought to you by Blake's Exotic Feeders. So if you are here in the United States and are looking for quail to feed to your reptiles, please check out Blake's Exotic Feeders. They hand raise everything at their facility right here in the United States, so you know you are getting a high quality feeder from a good US-based source. Once again, for feeder quail, check out Blake's Exotic Feeders. And here we are, we're doing it. Thank you guys for either tuning in live or listening after the fact. Please give us a subscribe here on the Trap Talk Reptile Network, not only on YouTube, but on the audio platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcast. 5-star review on those platforms would be wonderful. There is a new episode every single week from a list of some of the best podcast hosts in the game right here on this channel. So there is never a shortage of the highest quality reptile content for anybody who is looking. And if you are here right now, you probably want to listen to more podcasts. So with that out of the way, time for another solo episode. This will be my first solo episode without any sort of visual aids. So hopefully this is not too boring. For anyone who is tapped in live, if you want to leave a question or any comments on what I'm talking about, definitely will help this go on, and I'd be happy to answer some questions. But I know these are two topics that have been on my mind for quite a while. Very different topics, but both very important in my opinion. The free handling debate, for one, has been a debate for years. It's nothing new, nothing's changing. It'll always be the same. But there's been a groundswell of it recently for a couple of reasons. The first reason is there was a keeper in South Carolina who recently was envenomated by an inland taipan while free handling it. So for those who don't know the significance of that, the inland taipan is drop for drop the most lethal snake that lives on land on the planet. There are some aquatic species that are more toxic, but they don't come in contact with humans. And really, inland taipans in the wild don't come in contact with humans much either, unless humans are going out to search for them, because they're pretty remote desert species. But an inland taipan bite, that's about as scary as it can get. Quite literally the most dangerous snake a person can be envenomated by. And part of what made this so noteworthy of an event was that it was very, very public. This guy, I don't want to say his name just because I don't want to give him publicity, but very well known free handler from like the Carolina's reptile community. Somebody who is the center of lots of controversy, lots of friends and followers, lots of detractors, and everything in between. I haven't really ever seen a whole lot of the content. I bet a lot of you are aware of the situation as well. Doesn't seem like the best keeper. Doesn't seem like great conditions for the animals. Definitely doesn't seem like he's all the way there from a mental capacity standpoint. And oftentimes this person would brag about free handling, or, saying like anti-venoms for pussies, direct quote. That's something that he said. And then the juxtaposition of a post on one of the big venomous groups of the little inland taipan in one hand, hey, just got this inland taipan. And then about half an hour later, another post on the same group, no picture involved, asking if anyone has access to inland taipan antivenom. It's like, interesting. So this is the problem with the free handling culture, with everything like that, is it does happen sometimes. There are a lot of people who choose to partake in this type of behavior, and almost every single time it doesn't end poorly. And that's just because snakes just don't really bite that much across the board. I'm a venomous keeper. I've kept a decent amount of venomous species. I've worked with hundreds of non-venomous species, and I will say in my 15 years of experience that snakes don't really bite much. It's just not their go-to move. And I would hope that if you have a particularly aggressive venomous snake, that's not one that's in your free handling arsenal. Some people just, whether they're that center of the brain that detects danger just is absent. I know people who are like that, not even in regards to snakes. That's definitely something that happens to people, or whatever the reason is. This is something that they choose to do. But in this instance, boom, consequences. And this individual was hospitalized for, I believe, up to a week, eventually was able to source some antivenom and did recover, which, you can't speak negatively on that. Good thing that this person didn't lose their life, even though they were actively looking for it in a way. One thing that was kind of a point of controversy, but a lot of people were in support of, and so was I, was that the Kentucky Reptile Zoo and Kristen Wiley in particular was the one who was talking about it publicly, were very vocal about how they were not going to send their supply of antivenom to treat this bite, which is, that's a bold stance to take. And you can look at it one of two different ways. One is that you have the opportunity to save somebody's life and you're actively deciding not to. And the other way you can look at it, and this is what her point was that if we provide this antivenom to this person now, who was very obviously being reckless in their behavior with this animal, and more or less kind of earned the bite, now we don't have any more antivenom. What if somebody on either our staff or somebody from another facility experiences an envenomation as well? Now this person won't be able to be treated. And truly, I totally agree with that. I think that, for one, they're not some government institution. They're not part of the hospital. This is their property. This is their antivenom. They have whatever, they have the right to not release it. And at the same time, I guess it teaches a lesson to anybody else who has venomous snakes or wants venomous snakes, that, you know, you can't fully rely on, okay, if something happens, some institution is going to help me no matter what, which kind of, you know, it gives a little bit more perspective, because you typically, that's kind of what happens, is if there's an envenomation from some exotic species, typically like the local zoo or someone like that will provide the antivenom for the bite, and you're kind of saved by that. You know, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. You can't really, if you're not in control of that situation, then wow, you're in big trouble. Personally, that's why I don't like to keep a lot of exotic species. I mean, most of my venomous collection are snakes that can be treated by crofab antivenom that is carried by almost every hospital. And, you know, there's something to be said for that, where you don't want a bite to happen. You don't anticipate a bite happening. You do everything in your power to not have it happen. And sometimes things just happen. And when that access is pretty easy compared to some obscure Asian or African species that, and in some cases, don't even have antivenom. There's plenty of species of venomous snakes that don't actually have a straightforward treatment like that, which is really scary. And a lot of those species are in captivity. I mean, some of the most popular venomous species don't have a direct antivenom, like the Atheris guamangera, the variable bush vipers. You know, they're a small species. They're relatively hardy in captivity, especially captive bred ones. They're very beautiful, and they're a popular snake. But if you're bitten, you're riding that bite out. And as many people know, everyone reacts differently. You never really know how a bite is going to affect you. Obviously, there's a very wide array of venom compositions and whatnot within, you know, the hundreds and hundreds of venomous species that exist. And some are infinitely more toxic than others. But it's a risk no matter what you do. I mean, you can even go as far as to say, like, keeping like a mangrove snake. You know, that's a rear fang venomous species, or a Baron's racer, or even a Western hognose snake. There's some level of inherent danger that you're putting yourself in front of, and you need to understand that risk. So, and a lot of that to be said. When I was younger, I always wanted to keep venomous snakes, but I remember one instance in particular. I was probably about 15 or 16, working at the Wildlife Discovery Center outside of Chicago, and we were throwing our annual event called Reptile Rampage. It was kind of like a mini reptile show, purely educational. And the St. Louis Herp Society had come up, set up a table with some venomous species. And I was talking to one of the people behind the table just about venomous and about how I wanted to, you know, work with venomous snakes. And I was excited. And the guy he's looked at me, he's like, well, why? Why do you want to do that? And it took me aback. I really was kind of floored by it. I never really asked myself why. And he's like, if you don't have a good reason to do it, don't do it. I'm like, okay, you know, that's one person's perspective, but it definitely is one that I think everyone should consider, take a step back and truly evaluate the situation. Eventually, the conclusion that I came to was not only on like a pretty surface level that I'm just so fascinated by these snakes, I can't help myself, but that I can use my work with these snakes and then also like the platform that I have, be it, you know, pretty minimal, but whatever influence I can have via like Instagram and Facebook to set a good example of how to be a venomous keeper to other people. And that was part of my justification for keeping venomous snakes. Another thing that ties into it is, you know, obviously I live in the Southwest US, and I can, you know, 15 minutes away from my house, I can find mottled rock rattlesnakes, banded rock rattlesnakes, and being able to observe these snakes in the wild and in captivity and kind of learn about them in either direction from one another. Really, it's a special experience that it's not often available with a lot of the stuff we keep. You know, as many of you probably know, scrub pythons are my primary interest, and you know, being able to go see scrub pythons in the wild is a far cry compared to a rattlesnake. So it makes that experience a lot more special when when I can, have that experience in person. So that's another reason why I, why I like to keep these snakes. So that this event of this envenomation, it kind of turned the conversation back up about free handling. It's been a topic that it's nothing new. It's been discussed for a really long time. No progress has ever been made. Nobody has ever convinced somebody else that they're right or wrong. And, it's pretty infuriating to watch, because it's something that I don't typically try to give my 2 cents on. I also, with that even said, I've been debating for quite a while whether or not to actually speak about it at all, because I don't like throwing fuel on the fire. But especially with that and some other things that have happened since then, I'm like, okay, I just want to put my perspective out there and then shut up about it, because I feel like I have some thoughts that can probably help. Whether they do or they don't, I don't know. But here I am. I'm doing it. I'm contradicting myself a little bit. But anyway, with that said, there are 2 very staunch camps. There's the very anti-free handling, and then the free handlers and their supporters. There isn't very much no crossover there. There's little switching sides ever done. And there is a right answer. The right answer is it's terrible. I mean, there's nothing positive derived from it. There are lots of arguments that are made why one shouldn't free handle venomous snakes. There's the very simple one of, it's a very easy way to die. I'm like, yeah, having a king cobra or a green mamba inches away from your person is a very good way to die. Another argument is that, like with this case of the inland taipan bite, if you are envenomated and some zoo or some private institution has to send you their stash of antivenom for treatment of your bite, now that leaves the next person vulnerable for their bite. Another one is is legislation. Already I believe that there has been proposed legislation, emergency legislation, in direct response to this bite that happened. And it makes sense. Makes sense, doesn't it? If you aren't an educated person on this subject, if you're some local bureaucrat and you're just pushing papers and you see this pretty negative headline come up and you're like, wow, we need to deal with this. It makes sense. Before I go too much further, I want to answer Lisa's question. I guess I probably should define free handling before I go too much further, at least as far as I see it. So I would say there are levels to it for sure. So tailing, I wouldn't say tailing. If you're hooking and tailing a venomous snake, I wouldn't consider that free handling. I would consider that, probably a little bit more dangerous in some instances than double hooking a snake, or just using one hook and that's long enough to move snake from point A to point B. And then the higher tiers of free handling, that term is probably truly defined by both hands on the animal, no safety equipment. And then there are 2 forms of that free handling. And one of it being you are kind of using your hands as if they were hooks, and you are using them to steer the animal away from your body. And then the second one is the snake crawling up your arms, on your face, just absolutely no safeguards involved whatsoever. Just fully embracing what is to come. So that's what we're talking about here. And I think the second one is worse than the former, but I think that there are very few instances where tools make a venomous handling situation harder or more dangerous. The only one that can truly ever really be discussed is that of a very, very large and heavy king cobra outside of the enclosure. And even in that instance, it will also depend on the kind of space you're working with. And if the space you're working with isn't conducive of using a hook, you probably shouldn't have that snake in that space to begin with. Anyway, So I think, let's see what I got here. All right. Anyway, yeah. So the last two, and I'm not gonna harp on these points because my further point has nothing to do with this. The last two things that, other than the anti-venom, the legislation, is it's a terrible look for the hobby. It's a terrible look for us as, we want to be as professional as we can. If especially there are special interest groups and politicians that are actively trying to shut us down on a fairly regular basis, we want to have our best foot forward. And unfortunately, we don't, and we won't. And simply because it's human nature. And we'll get into that more in a second. And then the last one is another obvious one, is that it's just, first, you don't want to influence a new keeper that way. Some 13-year-old kid who now thinks that they can, hold mambas and cobras and stuff because they saw someone on YouTube do it. It's like, okay, yeah, pretty obvious take, nothing nuanced there, been said a million times. So I think what it really comes down to, you got to understand why one would do this in the first place. And before I get into it, I have friends who have and do free handle their venomous snakes. Oftentimes it's people who just don't post about it publicly. It's just something they do. And, and one thing I'll throw out there, I'm not innocent. I have done it. I'm not afraid to say it. I'm afraid of what my parents are going to say, who are probably both watching right now. But on two different instances, I have free handled venomous snakes, none in my own collection. One was in another person's collection. Another one was in the wild. And honestly, it just didn't really do it for me. And don't get me wrong. The reason why people do it is because it is a thrilling experience. It's the same reason why people jump out of airplanes and cliff dive and recklessly drive on the highway and do hard drugs. And it's just, it's a rush. And some people are more drawn to that than others. I from knowing a lot of people who have, had some of these kind of behavioral patterns in their life, in my eyes, it's oftentimes associated with pretty severe trauma that has been, endured throughout life, and, having a fucked up dopaminergic system and all that stuff. So, oftentimes when I see any of this stuff, honestly, I kind of come at it from a point of sympathy where, something happened to where now this is how you feel something. And that's it's sad. I mean, it truly is. I've dealt with my fair share of shit, especially in my adult life. And I'm very sensitive of that with people. So I'm never going to be one to just point fingers and shame and speak down from my castle to people because of things that they do that I don't approve of. It's not who I am, not who I'm going to be. But with that said, no matter what you want to say about it, this has major impacts on what we do. I know for a fact from a friend of mine who is in the UK that has friends in government, that these animal rights groups are working with the governments, and they have people that their job is just to scour social media and just find examples of where these groups of people, be it any sector of the animal community as a whole, be it mammals, birds, reptiles, fish, whatever, examples of where it's like, okay, look at how unruly this community is. Look at how unprofessional they are. Don't think that you're, don't think that what you're saying isn't going to be seen by someone who might use it against you later, because it is, and it will be. And that doesn't only go for posting about, look at me, I'm handling my snake. It's also the person who is arguing in the comment section about it. That honestly, to me, the comment sections, they anger me more than the actual posting of the free handling, and not because of the act of what it is. Obviously one's far worse than the other. It's just that I know I've seen this play out over and over again. And frankly, the side that has more support is the side of the free handling. And their only argument is, it's my snake, I can do what I want. And it's like, yeah. I mean, sure, you can. And you really can't debate that. You know, we live in the US. I mean, at least I do. A lot of people who are listening to, live here, and no one's going to stop you. And should they? I don't know. I don't think they should. So there's a very kind of basic discussion of rights as an American citizen, which can kind of be the end of the conversation right there. But unfortunately, and it just is what it is, there's two aspects in my mind of free handling venomous snakes, like why one would do it. One is just for the thrill, for that adrenaline rush, for that I'm doing something dangerous. And then the second aspect involves posting on social media. And the only reason why anyone would ever post something like that on social media is just purely for attention. I mean, there's no other reason. And there's a lot of things that people post online for attention. So this is not no subtext to that. It's just very much, this is how it is. This is why one does this behavior. So when you, as somebody who is trying to argue this point, are writing your paragraphs in the comments, you're doing exactly what they would want you to do. Attention, comments, notification, dopamine hit. And okay, well, I got a lot of reaction, so I'll do that again. That was cool. I like having a comment thread with 200 comments on it, and with that said, it's salacious. It's entertainment. It's, same reason why a lot of thrilling TV shows are popular. It's, somebody is going to watch a person free handle a king cobra. Oh my God, that's so dangerous. How are they doing that? I mean, honestly, it's the same reason why Steve Irwin was as popular as he was, just interacting with these animals that most people are terrified of and can kill you in a very, short moment's notice. With that, so being that the way it is, these people have big audiences. Some of the biggest YouTubers online right now are venomous free handlers. You're not going to stop that. And you're not going to convince their fan base to turn on them with your spiteful, angry comment. You're going to embolden them. That's how it happens. And I've seen it over and over again. Here's a post of, some big exaggerated thing. Oh, look at this video I did. And somebody in the comment section offers their opinion. And then they get absolutely trashed by like 30 people who are friends or followers of the person who originally posted it. What do you think is going to happen? You're going at their guy. It's human nature. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me why anyone would think that it go any differently than that. I mean, I don't think this is a bold thing to say. I don't think that anyone has ever been convinced to not free handle a venomous snake by a comment or a post on social media or a podcast or a whatever. I mean, truly, I think the only real way that would be changed is if, you knew someone personally and had a one-on-one private conversation and changed their mind, or like, and even not even, hey, this is, irresponsible. It's like, hey, I don't want you to die. Like, you're my friend. I don't want you to die. Like, I hope you stay around longer. To me, that's like the only thing, or even an envenomation. But this guy in South Carolina who just got envenomated, as soon as he was back on his phone, he was talking shit again. And, his whole collection got confiscated and his fans were like, I'm going to donate snakes back to you. And just, what are you going to do to stop that? Truly, like, what can one do in this situation to convince this person and their supporters that what's going on there isn't good? Absolutely nothing. That's not your problem anymore. That's not our problem. That's their problem. And Should it be happening? No. But can you control it? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It won't happen. You will have no impact on it. It is what it is. And like when people who are doing this, posting about this, they're not doing it because they think it's safe. Your comment didn't teach them anything they didn't know already. That's, they know everything that I laid out earlier in the episode, all the possible downfalls of people free handling venomous snakes. It's not like they don't know that. Like, oh my God, I thought what I was doing had no potential harm to anybody, myself included. Like, no, of course not. If they wanted to interact with a snake, there are thousands of species of non-venomous snakes in the world. That's why I don't free handle my venomous snakes, is that I have hundreds of non-venomous snakes. And I mean, frankly, I have a big collection of, in my opinion, the absolute most fun and engaging snakes to handle in the entire world, those being scrub pythons. So I can either interact with those, which is far more fulfilling than any of the venomous species I keep, or I can do a less fun thing with a species that is potentially going to kill me. For what? The risk reward. I mean, it's not even a discussion. It's not even something that I would think about. But that's how I think, and that's how a lot of other people think. We're good. We're convinced of it. And oftentimes, if you're complaining about excuse me, if you're complaining about free handling on your page or whatever, you're just talking into an echo chamber. You're talking to everyone who you're friends with who agrees with you. It's like, okay, cool. You just had a little circle jerk for a couple hours talking about how you guys don't like what's happening. Oh yeah, I agree with you. Like, wow, you guys really accomplished something today. I'm so proud of how you've all affirmed each other about how you don't like this. To what ends? To what ends is that really there for? And this to me kind of ties back into what I was saying earlier about, when I was faced with that consideration of, okay, why would I keep venomous snakes? And one of the reasons why I came up with was that I wanted to set a good example for people. And that's kind of my answer to this whole discussion. The amount of time, effort, mental energy that people put into bashing, posts bashing people, going crazy in comment sections, spreading negativity and all that. If you took that exact same amount of time and energy and mental resources and put it towards like something like what I do, where I'll post pictures of my venomous snakes on social media and talk about why I'm fascinated by this species, what I've learned about keeping them, why I love, just explain why the snake is so incredible, which they are. I mean, venomous snakes are some of the most fascinating creatures in the entire world. Then, I've had some posts get some pretty significant reach with just that kind of approach, and other people do as well. It's not just me. I'm speaking on behalf of myself because that's all I really can do, but there are plenty of people who take that approach. So if you as a commenter, if you are a venomous keeper, which a lot of people are who are passionate about this discussion, take the 45 minutes that you spent arguing in a comment section with someone whose opinion you will never change, absolutely will never change, and put that towards something that's educational, something that's showing proper handling techniques, and not even necessarily expressing why this is proper handling techniques. What about just a video of you holding the snake properly, just talking about how cool it is? People are there for the snakes at the end of the day. And those who are not there for the snakes, that's not your audience. That's the audience of some salacious YouTuber. And unfortunately, we're not going to grab those people. Those people who are clicking through YouTube looking at, dog bite videos or people falling off buildings or car crashes. They're not going to listen to this podcast. They might watch the dude get bit in the finger by a king cobra and be like, whoa, oh, that was so crazy, man. Oh, what's this? A guy gets an anvil dropped on him? I'm gonna watch that. That's not our audience. It's never going to be our audience. We can't control those people. We can't control their watching, viewing habits, and we shouldn't try. We have a finite amount of energy and things that we can do with our day. So, I mean, I don't understand why more people don't get this. It seems pretty straightforward to me. And if you aren't a venomous keeper, you can do your part as well. And like I was saying, the people who do this kind of content online, it's purely for the sake of attention, obviously, because what else would it be for? So the algorithm is a thing now. It wasn't a thing 8 years ago, but the algorithm is a thing. So if you dictate what happens online by what you do. So if you see a post like that and just scroll by it, it's less engagement that post gets, less engagement that person gets. Engage with people who you support. Leave a like and a comment on a post of something that you think is representative of what we should be doing. And every time that happens, that keeps getting put to the forefront. Unfortunately, we have to play this stupid game with social media. That'll tie into my later topic as well. But you can vote with your eyes. You can vote with how long you pause over a picture on social media, and vote with your follow and your share and your this and your that. As stupid and juvenile as it sounds, unfortunately, this is the game and the system that we're living in these days. So that's really my opinion on that. These discussions, they haven't ever gone anywhere. This is not a new topic. Free handling of venomous snakes has been an issue for our industry for a long time. And frankly, a lot of the people who started this industry were avid proponents of it. And still are. I mean, it's ridiculous, but it is what it is, and you're not going to stop it. I saw a video quite recently that I bet a handful of you guys did as well. That was a direct response to the same thing that I'm talking about, of an old school keeper who was talking about, the downsides of this, sitting at a table with a venomous snake on the table, and he's just playing with the venomous snake. It's like, wow, okay. I mean, little self-aggrandizing, if you ask me. I mean, you're trying to make a point. You're trying to be a savant of the industry, and meanwhile, you're doing it right in front of us, while explaining how you need to understand their behavior, and these snakes don't want to hurt you. It's like, yeah, I mean, yeah, that is true. They don't want to hurt you for the most part. I mean, I have a very decent sized venomous collection, and most of the snakes are really calm snakes. It just is. That's just how they are. It just, I don't know. There are certain species that are notorious, but that also exists in non-venomous snakes as well. And at least with the species that I keep, being primarily rattlesnakes and then some arboreal vipers, they just get very used to a routine. They get used to how you interact with them. They get used to how you handle them. And and that's the same with all snakes. They, repetition calms them down. They are obviously innately not wired to interact with humans. Very few species have even been bred long enough to be close to considered anything in the vicinity of domesticated. Definitely nothing that's no venomous snakes or anywhere close to that. But this is how snakes are. You handle them a certain way. You use your equipment one way, and you transfer them to a holding container, or you do whatever. And with a non-venomous snake, you hold on to it, or they get accustomed to it. They're like, oh, this is how this goes. When this happens, I don't get harmed, and pretty pretty straightforward stuff. So the same applies to venomous snakes, and that's why you see these videos where these people are free handling these snakes, and obviously the reaction from the casual viewer is, wow, that's so crazy. This person has this connection with this animal or whatever. It's like, no, this is how they are. These are snakes. Snakes will always be snakes. And you can be a keeper, have a non-venomous snake, and go that animal's entire life without it biting you. Same goes for a venomous snake. But when that milk snake bites you, compared to when that timber rattlesnake or that monocle cobra bites you, those are very different situations. And very different for the sake of your life, not even looking outside of just yourself. I don't get it. Personally, I still don't get it. And like I said earlier, I've done it. I'm not innocent to this. I'm not speaking from the ivory tower where I'm like, free handling is terrible. It's like, oh no, I'm no better than anyone else. I've just been around for long enough. I've known a lot of people, and I've just seen how this goes. And I'm never going to promote it. I think there's also levels to it as well. And like I said, I know people who do it. I have friends who do it, and I have friends who free handle their snakes privately, and I have some friends that, not a lot, but a couple that have occasionally made that public. And for me, it's like, okay, do I have to agree with everything that somebody does in order to consider them a friend? No, I don't have to. And I also don't need to try to preach to them about what I think they're doing right or wrong, as I wouldn't want someone to preach to me about that. But with that said, there are levels to it, like there is with non-venomous keepers. There are keepers that will free handle their venomous snakes that have very healthy looking snakes. They take good care of them. They have them in good clean enclosures. And then there are ones who have them living in filth, and they're essentially abusing these animals. And they also free handle their snakes. I'd much rather the first one than the second one. Ultimately, you can't really control the people, so you just hope for the best for the animal. So when I see somebody who free handles their snakes and they seem to be healthy snakes, they seem to be taken care of well, okay, at least we've crossed that barrier. At least the snakes seem like they're doing okay. There's then the other argument, which is very valid, of, okay, you get envenomated, depending on where you live, that could result in your entire collection being confiscated. Now either these animals need to be placed at a zoo or something like that. And oftentimes zoos won't have space for an entire collection of venomous snakes, so they end up getting euthanized. Like, all right, well, your reckless behavior just got your entire collection killed. That has no impact on people, but major impact on these animals that you probably love, if this is something that you do. If you don't love it, I mean, my God, why would you even think about doing it? Like, why would it even cross your mind if it's not something that you truly love? So I guess and to kind of round that out, for me, if this is something that you choose to partake in, hope you love it. Hope you treat those animals well. And I don't know, try to do something good for everybody, because you're not helping. But then on the other side of the coin, and I think this is really the more important part of why I wanted to discuss this tonight, I really I call for everybody to just stop talking about it. It's fed by attention, and if you don't give it attention, eventually, slowly, it'll die out. And like I said earlier, it's kind of a little bit oxymoronic that I'm talking about it now, but like I said, this is something I've been thinking about for quite a while. I'm like, all right, I'm going to get it out there, talk about it, and then stop talking about it. So, this is where we are. These comment threads on Facebook and whatnot, they do nothing. Bashing people does nothing. Actually, bashing people actually helps those who are being bashed. It is true, especially in today's day and age, that any publicity is truly good publicity. So if you are going out of your way to give someone who you don't even like that publicity, what are you doing? Like, what thought process brought you there to where, okay, I see what this person is doing. I'm vehemently against what they're doing. Let me promote them. And in the meantime, make yourself look like a jaded asshole. You're not going to have support other than by maybe a few friends who are on the same side as you. Especially if you're attacking someone, you're going to embolden their fan base and their friends. So you give this other person publicity, you damage yourself greatly in the process, and you waste so much time that could have been spent on doing something positive for yourself, for your animals, for the community as a whole. I don't know. To me, I just don't see the logic there. It doesn't make any sense to me. And it's something that I think we can stop immediately. And that's kind of why I've been saying, up to this episode, that I'm going to talk about how we can end the conversation on venomous free handling. Those of us, myself included, who don't promote it, don't really support it, don't think it's a good idea. I think it's on all of us to stop talking about it and use that energy to talk about what we would like to be seen in the forefront. Talk about these animals for what they are, just without any sort of sensationalism behind it. I mean, a venomous snake is pretty sensational on its own. A rattlesnake reared up in its defensive posture, rattling, or a cobra hooding, wow, there's not a whole lot that's cooler in the entire world than that. That's more than enough for me, and I think it's more than enough for a lot of people as well. So, I don't know. I call on all of it, anyone who's listening to this to change your tone. Don't support it. You don't need to support it. Pretend that it doesn't exist, and maybe eventually it won't. It will always exist, but what's the approach so far has not worked, and it will never work. It'll only make it get bigger and scarier and everything like that. So, I call on everybody to just stop giving it your attention, stop giving it the time of day, move on, and either as a keeper promote, proper practices and show these snakes just for their beauty and what they really are, and just don't even give it the time of day. Don't give it your mind. Don't give it any attention. That's all we can really do. There isn't a ton of content out there on the other side of the fence. There really isn't. And I think a lot of that is because a lot of really serious keepers don't care about social media that much. And I'll give them credit for that. Social media has a lot of downsides, but unfortunately, in today's day and age, this is where we are. This is the world we're living in. This is how you have to be a professional in this field. And it's the new reality. It is where we are, and you either for the cause or you're not. And this is not to say that anybody who doesn't partake in social media is hurting anyone else, but I think it's hard for me to justify someone taking a hard stance publicly when they don't do anything positive publicly. It's hard for me to support that. So yeah, I guess that's kind of it. I could keep running in circles for a little while longer. I think 50 minutes talking about this, yeah. And this is kind of, exactly the point. It's just, it's the circus sideshow. It's, this is not, it's not the professionals. It's not the, exemplary kind of vision of what we want to do. So it's, you either go to the circus or you don't, and if you don't go to the circus, just show what you think is better than the circus. That's what I got to say. So anyway, enough of that. I think I've said more than enough. Time to get on to the next topic. Before that, I'm going to be a professional and take a swig of water. No guest makes it very difficult to drink water on the podcast. So anyway, second topic of the night, which was going to be the main topic of this podcast, and I decided to throw the free handling in it after all the promotion and whatnot started, but is the idea of scarcity in the industry. So, and I think that can be coupled with kind of some things being special, things being rare, exclusive. That's kind of what this industry was built off of. For anyone who has read the book The Lizard King, which that was like the Bible to me when I was 17, 18, 19 years old. The snake that really started the reptile pet trade in the world was the albino Burmese python. And why did that spark an entire industry to be formed? Well, for a few reasons. One is that, really the reason is that this was put on a pinnacle. It was like the sought after snake. It was obviously completely different than a regular Burmese python. Very beautiful coloration. I forget the man's name, but this famous magazine that had the cover of the exporter in was, I think, Malaysia or something like that, with the big satellite phone with the Burmese python in his other hand. It was exclusive. It was, oh my God, how did this guy get this snake? How can I get this snake? Who's going to get this snake? And then it makes it over to Bob Clark. And wow, okay, he has this animal. I really want to see this thing. Oh, is it going to be able to, are we going to see more albinos? Wow, that would be so cool. That's the scarcity. That's the intrigue. That's what is this? Why is this happening? What's going to happen next? It creates a buzz. It creates, like I said, it creates intrigue. And that's how the industry has existed kind of beyond, because reptiles really don't have an intrinsic value. It's really whatever value we place on it. And a lot of times that value is in the scarcity, whether it be, how the ball python industry has existed this whole time is based on, this is the new morph. This is the new combination. Frankly, this is going to be the next thing that is going to make somebody a millionaire. That next big thing kind of always kept the gears turning, kept the interest there, kept the intrigue. Same with take the morphs out of it. Like, for instance, this year, the Gonyosoma margaritatum, the royal tree snake. It's like the first time these things have almost ever been imported into the States ever. That's exactly what drives this industry. A new species that people have known about forever, arguably the best looking snake on the entire planet. And now it's at an importer in Florida. And me living wherever I do, I could potentially get the snake, or, someone else is going to get it. Well, I want to get in their list so that when they breed this animal, I can buy offspring from them. And that's what drives it. One thing that I'm kind of, and I've said it on a few podcasts, like I kind of like mourn reptile shows in a way, and reptile shows, obviously they still happen. And that's kind of the issue. Growing up, going to Tinley Park, 2011, 2012, 2013, that there was a buzz in that room that, this is where everyone congregates to twice a year. All of the best breeders in the country, they drive from the far ends of the states to the center of the country, right outside of Chicago, to bring their very best of the best, to show out, to steal the show, and to make a lot of money. And people travel from everywhere because their favorite breeders are going to be at this show, and they want to get this new gene for their whatever, or They know that the Chondro Coalition table will be on the back wall, and they want to get some of the best green trees in the country from, people like Rico Walder or Marshall Mendez. And that was about as special as it gets. It wasn't out of the realm of possibility for multiple, dozens of vendors to go there that weekend and clear 6 figures in sales, which now seems like as far of a cry as possible from what it used to be. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But the reason why I say I mourn reptile shows even now, even though there are more than ever, is that they're just not as special as they used to be. They feel like they can be missable events where 10 years ago, 15 years ago, Tinley Park, Daytona, Anaheim, back when Arlington was Arlington, these felt like events that needed to be attended. If you're a reptile enthusiast, if you consider yourself part of the industry, you're there no matter what you're doing. You're planning your year around traveling for these shows. You're planning your finances around having the money you want to spend at that show. You're checking the vendor list to see who's going to be there. They were the big events, and they were kind of dampened by a few different things. One of it being the surge of online sales, and with sites like MORPH Market. MORPH Market wasn't an original concept unto itself as far as a aggregate online reptile marketplace, but it was done far better than anything that had ever been thought of before. The 2 classic ones were Fauna Classified and Kinksnake.com. And in some communities, those 2 websites are still very much alive. But then this far superior, technologically advanced system came along and was like, all right, this is the home of selling reptiles. Cool, this is awesome. You can search by genes you want in your animals instead of having to go on Fauna and scroll down, click next, scroll down, check this ad that doesn't have a picture, go back. The accessibility was innovated to a point where you wouldn't need to do in-person sales anymore to be a reptile breeder, which is 1,000% the truth today. And I would venture to guess, and this is based on nothing other than just pure observation, I would say, if I had to put a number to it, I would say probably these days, maybe 95 to 98% of all of revenue of reptile sales gets run through online sales. Considering that 20 years ago, that's probably that percentage of shows is kind of sad, honestly. Buying an animal online is very convenient. It's easy. You can be connected with breeders that you would never see at the show that you can attend, which is great. And there's a lot of virtue to it. And I'm not going to try to talk down on online sales, but then it decreases the quality of those shows so much, because not only do breeders now no longer need to actually vend shows to make a living, their best stuff is gone already because it all sold online. One of my favorite parts about Tinley Park back in the early to mid 2010s was there would always be specific animals. You're like, I need to go because I know this person is bringing this. I've used this example before, but to me, the biggest example of this was when Brian Barczyk produced the first scaleless ball python. It was a brilliant marketing campaign. It was incredible, and it worked, and it was awesome. He had the video that he did of going to cut the egg, and you see it a little bit. You see a little snippet in the thumbnail. You don't really see the snake. And now they announced, we're going to unveil the scaleless ball python at Tinley Park. That there was a buzz in the room that weekend where everyone wanted to go see that snake, myself included. And I did. And it was just like, holy crap, this is actually real. And the story behind it, the way that they told that story through the videos, it was poetic. It was incredible. they did a tremendous job with that, culminating at Tinley Park. That just doesn't happen anymore. And for a lot of reasons, especially when it comes to ball pythons, and I'm very much removed from that sector of the industry. From being an outsider, it seems like the new morph thing doesn't really matter anymore. A world's first means nothing, and this is not talking down. This is just being being objective. Patrick, I don't. Would that have been what's his name? Why am I blanking on this? Wilbanks or something like that. The Black Eye Lucy at Arlington. That was probably before my time. Wilbanks. So, but yeah, something like this exactly. A black-eyed leucistic ball python, first time seen. You want to go to the show to actually see this animal in person. If you're hardcore about what we're doing, and there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who are, you're gonna get a few of your buddies together in a van and minivan and do that drive, switch off, drive through the night, crash in a hotel all together. That's an event to see that animal, and something like that brings a community together so much stronger than anything online could. Scott makes a good point too. And this is obviously, there are ways to navigate this, but definitely when you're selling someone online, they can very much kind of fudge their identity, and especially when it comes to large constrictors or venomous snakes. If you're trying to vet somebody for their aptitude, not having a conversation in person definitely makes that a lot more difficult. So, but then why did this happen? Why are shows not as special as they used to be? And I think there's a lot of reasons. I think the emergence of the internet, and particularly social media, have had a big impact on that. And a lot of it is because it's free. It's a free medium. Websites have been effectively killed by Facebook and Instagram. I remember when I was a kid, I would go to all the websites of all the ball python breeders and all the leopard gecko breeders and stuff like that. It was, I would have my Safari with like 30 windows open at any given point in time to just see what was going on. And they were, beautifully curated websites with their availability pages and breeding pages, their lineages. I mean, the old Signal Herp website was incredible for those types of things. So, but you got to pay for your web developer. You got to pay for your domain, and the attention isn't there anymore. Now it's on Facebook. All you got to do is set up an account for free on your phone. It's linked to your Gmail and stuff. It's the convenience level is there to the point where it's a no-brainer. But then again, that comes back to the special factor, the scarcity, intrigue factor going down. It's because it's now so accessible. And YouTube did a similar thing as well. To go back to Barcheck, snake bites was super innovative in the way of how you communicate about what you're doing. And I every week I was waiting for that new episode to drop. That was my routine. And unfortunately now especially in that kind of format of a video, podcasting would be a different story. The amount of actual decent YouTube content that's out there is abysmal compared to how much content there is. To give a couple of shout outs, I would say Dan Maliri and then Gary Scavino would be like my two that I would point to, GS Reptiles, DM Exotics, of YouTube channels where you can actually get good content about these animals, well produced, that's engaging with two good speakers who are good at what they do. But for every Gary or every Dan, there's 100 brutal accounts or sensationalized, or just, you can't go fully educational. You can't go fully sensationalized. You got to kind of hit some sort of middle ground. And I think those two do a very good job of showing the animals in their best light, but also making it very entertaining. So that, again, more of this transition to online. Instagram has been another interesting one because it took a lot longer to catch on than others did. Facebook was definitely first, and that obviously has to do with Instagram having a primarily younger demographic. But I was on Instagram with a reptile page in 2013 or 2014, so I've seen it grow the entire time, and there's been a lot of good from it, a lot of bad from it. I think the one thing that Instagram, what makes it better than Facebook, is just the way it's formatted. The comment section is not quite as prominent. So to tie back into the earlier conversation, the chances of some sort of discussion about free handling venomous snakes having thousands of pieces of engagement on an Instagram post is virtually impossible, because you're probably not going to open that comment section to begin with on Instagram. So for that, I love it. I think Instagram is great because it's just, especially you follow people you like, you scroll on your page, and you see cool animals, you see people with, short little video clips. But then again, you get your fix. Part of going to the reptile shows was I get to see these animals that I don't get to see because I have a small collection, or I'm new, or I don't have friends around me with bigger collections, or maybe the zoo doesn't have the best reptile exhibit. So you go to the reptile show and you see all this interesting stuff that you don't get to see other places. Well, now if that's all over social media, obviously in person and online you can't really replace one with the other, but you can sure try. And a lot of people do. And I think, to tie back to something that Scott said earlier, my next point, COVID was the next thing that really kind of fucked us. Obviously nothing you can really control there, but that time during lockdown, that 2020, the boom in the reptile industry was insane. It was, who could have really seen that coming? Apparently, when you're locked in your house, having some snakes around isn't the worst idea in the world to a lot of people. But just as it kind of exploded the way it did, there inevitably was going to be an opposite and potentially equal reaction to that. And I think that's what we see these days with tons of people selling out of their ball python collections, or stuff like that, where they were sold the dream, they bought in, they had nothing better to do, and dive in head first, and realize in the not too distant future that wasn't the best move for you. But obviously that's not what we're talking about. But with COVID, obviously, for a decent amount of time, most reptile shows were shut down. And once it opened back up, another equal and opposite, and not even equal, an opposite reaction that was far more intense occurred, where new promoters and new shows started popping up left and right, new locations, new weekends. And now today, I mean, and this is, again, not an educated number, but just a number that I feel like from observing is probably close to accurate. I would assume there's probably 10 to 20 reptile shows a weekend in the country. And that is disgusting to me, and it's hard to say that promoters shouldn't run their shows, vendors shouldn't go to their shows, because that's how they make their living. But I think that the increase of shows has watered them down to the point where no show is a need to see show. And the way that I look at it, and I could be wrong, but if you're a vendor and you're vending 40 shows a year, I would have to think that you would make a lot more money vending 4 shows a year if there were only 4 shows a year. Meaning that the customers had no choice but to formulate their life and their schedule around those few weekends. Because when there's a show, especially if you live somewhere like Central Texas, Illinois, Northern Indiana, Pennsylvania, the Southeast, Georgia, Carolinas, you can go to a reptile show every weekend of the year within probably a 6 to 7 hour drive. then what's the incentive to go to any of them? If you miss this one, you can go to the one next weekend, or the one the following weekend, or the one the following weekend. Or then what's really the incentive to go to any of them? And if there are shows that frequently, what are the chances that anything super special is going to be there? What's the chance that that mind-blowing snake is going to be unveiled at random show X in this town where they run an expo twice a month all year round? And what are the chances that somebody who's walking through that show is going to be a buyer at that show, when they know that if they can't make up their mind, they can just come in 2 weeks and, push that on. The way that I see it, if that show that is run twice a month was run 2 or 3 times a year, your customer base, they're going to that 2 to 3 times a year show. They're going to buy, because they know if they don't, they're out of luck for the next 4 to 6 months. And that's kind of how like Tinley Park used to be, where it happened twice a year. I was a kid. My entire financial life was March to October. I planned like everything that I was like, all right, I want to get this animal at October Tinley. It's going to cost me this much money, so I got to save up this much from this and that and the other thing. And it was fun that way. It made it so much more fun. But if there was a show every weekend, where's the entry? How's that going to be special? And even then, the best breeders aren't going to go to those shows. What's the point? The people who you'd really want to see, they're not going to be attracted to those events, because the door is going to be smaller because of how frequently they occur. They don't need to come to this one. They can just go to the next one. So anybody who does a lot of business and they have a big online presence, they have absolutely no reason to go to that show. If they don't have a reason to go to that show, you have to assume that a lot of the other vendors that are providing the top of the line stuff don't either. The overall quality of the experience goes down. There's less of a reason for the customers to go to the show. And then they just deteriorate. And on the inverse, then the big shows aren't even that special, because any show, majority of the audience is going to be local people. There's no reptile show where more people travel to it than come locally. Maybe the one exception would be the ham show in Germany, and I'll talk about that in a second, because I think that's the example of what I'm talking about. So, let's use Tinley Park as an example, because that's the one I've been talking about. Tinley Park is not going to be as good as it can be if there's a show running every single weekend within a 6-hour radius of Tinley Park in Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. It's just not going to be, because your customer base is going to go to those shows as well. They're going to buy their animals from here, from there. Vendors are going to be doing all those shows. So you don't even need to go to Tinley Park to get the snake from this vendor who you really like, because they're at this local show that is half the distance from you. And the door it's a $5 entrance instead of a $20 entrance, or whatever it is. So, it waters down everything. And not to stray too far from the ham conversation, I saw a picture, which to Scott's point, photography just doesn't happen inside that show. Another added level of intrigue. The Ham Germany reptile show is probably up there with Tinley Park for the most famous reptile show in the world. And you don't know what it looks like. There are thousands of pictures and videos. I mean, hundreds of thousands of pictures and videos of the Tinley Park show, which is not a bad thing, but there's that intrigue there of, I need to go to this show because I have no idea what it is. And I hear that the diversity is incredible, that the crowds are so dense that you don't have a second opportunity to walk by a table. If you're walking by a table and you think you want to buy that animal, you make that decision right there, because if you don't buy that animal, you're not going to that table again, and inevitably somebody who's behind you is going to buy that animal too. I did see, and there was a picture that was going around on Facebook not too long ago from the last ham show, and it was just jam-packed to the gills. And Mike Barrera commented on the picture. He was at the show. He just said, for hours, you could not move. That is what we in the US should strive for. We should strive for a show that is so popular and has so much intrigue and so much lore behind it that you get in the building and you literally can't move because there are so many people who want to be there. Tinley Park was like that pre-COVID, especially the October Tinley on like a Saturday. If you're not a vendor and you get that VIP pass, you do your rounds, you get your animals, you leave, you get lunch, and you come back at 2 because there is no point in being in that room from 10 to 2 because you can't move. And especially if you have any sort of anxiety or claustrophobia, you're not having a good time. But the impact that has on the industry as a whole, to me, is just so positive because you see that picture from ham and you're like, gosh, I need to see what that's like. I need to go there. How expensive are plane tickets? I mean, will I be able to operate over there as an American, as an English speaker? There's all these questions that you ask yourself, and you're thinking about it. Like the Dallas Reptile show just happened, and I didn't hear any conversation about it before or after. And at the show, this is not just to talk shit, this is just to be honest, I had conversations with people who were Texas people who would always been that show. They said, yeah, I just didn't do it this year. It just doesn't seem worth it to me. And I know people who would have done this show who decided to do a smaller local show a few hours south because they know they're going to get better sales there. And I heard that, I'm like, that's what's wrong with the shows. There's no reason why the Dallas NARBC show shouldn't be the journey to Mecca of Texas and of Oklahoma and Arkansas. And, if you're within 8 hours of that show, that should be a weekend you can't miss. And people missed it because there was not crowded for a minute the entire weekend. And that's just, it's just sad to me because that Arlington show used to be like, it was a smaller venue, but it used to be like Tinley, and where you kind of, if you weren't there, you had some massive FOMO. It's just sad to me. I think the only real solution to this issue here in the States is just, and it's probably not going to happen. And I wouldn't even necessarily say I'm calling for it to happen. It'd be cool if it did, but let's cancel 90% of the shows in the country. And if you're a promoter, like what Rami does with the Reptile Super Show, possibly the best promoter in the game. He runs 3 shows a year. He does a massive amount of promotion for them, runs a huge venue, packs it with vendors. There's not an empty table in that building. He does lots of local advertisement, radio, billboards and stuff like that. And a lot of freaking people go to that expo. I would be hard pressed to think that he makes less money than the promoter who's doing 50 shows a year. I don't know, but just from observing, I'd have to imagine that Rami is doing a whole hell of a lot better than these people who are packing out gymnasiums. Not packing them out, who are putting tables in gymnasiums and are running the show twice a month. I don't know. Just, I don't see why having the bigger venue, the bigger event, more promotion, I don't see why that wouldn't have an overall positive effect on everybody involved, from the customer to the vendors to the promoter. Look at ham. Look at the ham show. Look at the old school Tinley Park. that's what happened. And, you know, I've had conversations with people where they're like, Saturday at Tinley Park, I had 4 people at the booth, and we had a rotation of, there was a line. You take your person, they get their animal, you check them out. The next guy's getting the next customer. And we were doing that from before the show opens until the show closes, and maybe even a little after the show closes until security kicks us out. That has not existed for probably at least 6 and maybe 8 years at any show in the entire country. And there's no reason why I can't. Obviously, like I was saying earlier, online sales are going to inevitably have a major impact on it. But that doesn't mean that shows have to be treated the same way that online sales do. And I think that's where a lot of the issue comes into play. You know, people, and me included, when looking for a new animal to buy, if I go on to MORPH Market, just to use it as an example, because that's where you go to see what things cost these days, and I want to buy species X, MORPH Y, and I go to that page and I see 50 available, I'm like, oh, well, where's my incentive to do it now? Why do I need this animal today when there are so many available that inevitably in 6 months, these people will be dropping their prices because they can't sell them now. So I'll wait. Oof, I don't know. That to me is just not the way to do it. The person who I think does this the best of anybody in the history of the reptile industry is Ed Marino. I think probably everyone who's listening to this knows the name Ed Marino, and if not, he's the god of Amazon basin emerald tree boas. Probably the best example of a niche breeder in the history of reptiles. He took this species, which on its very own is potentially the most beautiful snake in the world. Some people might argue, and has refined it with a machinist eye, which is what he does professionally, and produces snakes that it'll take 30 years for anyone to come close to. He pops up on social media. He's around. He'll post, but not all the time. And in the probably at this point 8 years that I've followed his work pretty closely, I think I can remember twice he has ever actually put an ad up for a snake for sale. He's been selling snakes that whole time. You just don't see it publicly. And everybody who watches Ed Marino knows that. So they're like, can I even get on the waiting list? Like, what's that even like? I mean, how long do I need to wait for one of these? That's intriguing. That's the scarcity aspect. Amazon basin emeralds are available from other places sometimes, but they sure as hell don't look like Ed's, and they never will. So if you want the best of the best, there's one person that you need to go to, and he might not necessarily be the easiest one to get a hold of. And I mean, Ed's a nice guy. I know Ed. I like Ed. He's not a mean person. He's, but he's kind of like, he's enigmatic. You don't really know, because he doesn't put himself out there to that extent. He just has the best animals that you can find. And maybe you get on that waiting list and he's like, all right, well, it's probably going to be a couple of years, but your place is saved. When you get that message in a couple of years that, hey, it's up, you're here, your heart starts pounding, you get excited. This is what we're here for. And you get that picture and you see the notification, you're like, oh my God, what's the snake look like? And you see like, oh, that's incredible. I've been waiting for this for so long. That is what this is all about to me, not going on to Fauna, to not pick on MORPH Market the whole time. I have nothing against MORPH Market, and seeing 35 of this snake available from nameless, faceless breeders, 123 Exotics has it for $30 less than 456 Exotics. You're not enticing that person to buy that animal. Your only hope is that your potential customer is so obsessed with this animal you have that they have no choice but to buy that animal right there and then. And you know, if you're like, all right, I kind of want this animal, let me think about it. You go back to that listing in a week, it's still there. You go back a week later, it's still there. You go back 2 months later, it's still there. Now, especially if you're in any sort of position to where you want to turn this into some amount of a living for yourself or a side hustle or self-sufficient, you see these animals sitting there available and like, is this even a good project to get into? They don't seem to be selling. No one seems to really care about these. Well, yeah, I mean, self-fulfilling prophecy right there. One thing that I think to kind of ties in with what I was talking about with Ed, but is a broader topic. Social media is here to stay. It's, you know, there's no avoiding it, but you can use it in a number of different ways. I think that one thing that should be emphasized more is the ratio when you're posting, the ratio of sales posts to non-sales posts. And those non-sales posts can very much be indirectly selling your product, so to speak. I don't want to think of an animal as a product, but we're talking about business here. It is obviously the product of the industry. If you let's use Lisa as an example. Lisa's a great example. If Lisa only ever popped up to say Southern white-lipped python available, X dollar amount, and then disappeared until the next time Lisa pops up with for sale. Okay, yeah, sure. This is okay, cool. That animal's for sale. But if in between those, she posts dozens of times just about the animal, a cool picture or a video of it doing something interesting or things that create intrigue in that snake. Now, when that sales post comes up, someone who's been following Lisa for a period of time is like, oh my God, Lisa's finally selling a white-lipped python. I need to jump on this right now. And they're probably right, because that is an opportunity that's not going to come along very often in this particular example in particular. But that sale and that situation I just laid out was created by, you see Lisa, you see her white-lipped pythons. They're, wow, that's such a beautiful snake. You see some interaction with the animal, like, oh, these maybe aren't the monsters that they have been portrayed to be over time. And that interest grows, the fascination grows. I have questions I want answered. Oh, she did this podcast here. She's on Morelia Python Radio. Let me listen to these episodes. I want to send her a message, but I don't want to sound like an idiot. I want to educate myself on these animals first. Now, not only is this potential customer fully enthralled with these animals, they're doing their own research. They're going about things the right way. They found a good breeder. And this is not just some import that's on a flipper table at one of these million local shows that has mites and isn't eating and is, honestly, one thing that people don't talk about with all of these shows, I'm going to go on a little tangent. These shows that happen, a lot of them are done by the same vendors every weekend. Do you think these animals ever exit those deli cups? How are these animals treated in between 7-hour drive, 2-day weekend show? Do they get fed? If you're vending 40 reptile shows a year, do you even have the opportunity to take care of these animals? Truly, like from not even, it's bad for business, it's bad for the industry, it makes everything kind of dull and lame. If you're vending that many shows a year, can you truly take care of your animals? Because they're going to be snakes that you don't sell for an entire year, 2 years. What happens to them when they're not sitting on the table? Do they have a spot in your rack with a water bowl that's clean? Do they just get thrown wherever and then get pulled out from wherever? And do you practice any sort of quarantine procedures, any sort of biosecurity? Are you treating for mites that you could be transporting to and from these shows? Like, how does one operate as a 30+ show a year vendor? I can't imagine very well. Like, if a snake is going to a show on a back-to-back weekend, you might only have 2 days where you could possibly have that snake in its enclosure between shows. But are you going to feed it and then transport it while it's still digesting? Probably not. You don't want that snake to regurgitate in its container. And now there's all this bacteria in this box that has dozens of snakes in it. Maybe the animal dies in transit because of this regurgitation. You know, I mean, these frequencies of shows that might not be good for the industry, for people, for growth. It's probably worse for the animals than for that. Anyway, no, I had no plans on mentioning that. I'll kind of try to regroup myself back to what I was talking about. Water break number 2. Let's see. Yeah, and exactly. Then, and Emmy makes a great point. The shows, it builds suspense. It builds, everything like this. And it's kind of why I'm on this point about how to operate online, how to promote yourself, and how to maintain that scarcity while being as visible as one can possibly be. And some people might be like, hey, you post 5 days a week, you post in multiple Facebook groups, you're doing a podcast, you're all over the place. I'm like, yeah, you kind of have to be. I wouldn't do this if I didn't feel like I had to stay visible with the algorithm. Instagram was so much better when it was chronological. You just you posted at 3:30 Central Time when I was in Chicago every day, and that's how the most eyes saw you. And it was better that way. But now that we're in the algorithm, you kind of have to play the game. But there's multiple ways you can play the game. There's some people that their only exposure is just this for sale, this for sale, this for sale. It's not really a great pitch. Like, okay, cool. Fuck, I'll keep scrolling. Like, what? And bad picture, no description, just species name, maybe a morph. Message me. No. I'm not going to message you. Like, why? And I don't necessarily love the idea of thinking about having to pitch a snake, because it just something seems kind of dirty about that to me. But there's a difference between pitching and promoting. For me, with the scrub pythons, when I was first getting into them, they had an awful reputation, as we've talked about many times here on this show. Once I got into them, realized, oh wow, this is quite literally the coolest snake species in the entire world, or complex of species in the entire world, for me, as far as what I like about snakes. They check all the boxes and then exceed expectations that you could have, but they're greatly misunderstood. Well, I don't have anything for sale right now, but in 5, 6, 7 years, I probably will. So how can I share with others my experience with these snakes without literally putting a snake in their hands? That's the easiest way to do it. But that's not always the most practical, especially, your animals are in your house. You don't have a storefront or something like that. You don't want to be bringing strangers around. And, like if I'm talking to somebody, if I'm in Texas and somebody in Pennsylvania is asking me questions about these animals, okay, obviously that can't happen. We're just, geography exists. So the way that I saw it and the way I still see it, I'm promoting these animals by showing pictures of them, how beautiful they are. There's a reason why, if you scroll through my page, almost everything is a picture of me with a snake in my hand. It's because I want to show that you can do that. These are all animals that, although they might have bad reputations, most of it's completely unfounded. Same thing with the free handling discussion earlier. Why do most people who free handle venomous snakes not get bit? Because snakes don't really bite that much across the board. And if I can show these snakes being calm, being interactive, show how beautiful they are, show, if they're some like a darker species, put them in sunlight, show their iridescence, or with tiger rat snakes. I love when I post videos of them with doing their slow tongue flicking. Just such a fascinating behavior that you don't see in very many snakes. You know, that they're, to me, in a display enclosure, a tiger rat snake is as close as you can get in a snake form to like a tree monitor. An animal that's going to be using vertical space, acting arboreal, perching. They don't really perch, they kind of drape, but, you know, sitting up high, sitting low, and being able to observe all these different behaviors. That to me is the best form of promotion that can be done if one of your eventual goals is to sell offspring of your animals, is by showing your potential client base what makes these things so special. A post of a crappy picture with a name and a price tag is not going to do any of that. So you can create this scarcity, you can create this intrigue with heavy presence, but depends on what that type of presence is. I don't like to post sale ads if I can avoid it. I'd much rather create that intrigue and have somebody reach out to me, have a conversation, talk about what they're interested in, answer as many questions as I possibly can, make this interaction be as positive for somebody who might get a snake from me as can possibly be, not only because this is how I think this should be done, because I know that that's going to be an experience for this person that's going to be entirely positive, getting a high quality animal from a source that they know they can continue to contact with questions afterward. If issues come up, somebody who they have confidence in won't leave them hanging, leave them high and dry. That's what makes this industry move forward, makes us progress, makes everything move in a direction that not only looks good publicly, again, to tie it back into the earlier discussion, also feels good for us. We feel like we're doing right by ourselves, by the animals, and by the customer. It pisses me off when I see people posting about, I bought this emerald tree boa at a reptile show. The breeder said it was captive bred and it was eating rats. And, this thing is, it's bone thin, sunken head muscles. Quite obviously is going to have chronic regurgitation syndrome, or, people peddling colubrids that are riddled with cryptosporidium. You can just tell by looking at the animal if you know what you're looking for. But most people who are going to go to a reptile show to buy a California king snake aren't going to be able to pick out one that looks healthy from one that has cryptosporidium. How could they? This is a beginner species for the most part. I mean, obviously there's a lot of people who keep them that are advanced because they're great snakes, but it's a snake that a lot of first-time keepers will look at. And if one's $50 less than the other, they're going to go with that one that's $50 less. I mean, 99 times out of 100. Well, why is it $50 cheaper? Well, because that snake might not live a whole lot longer, and this guy wants to get it out of the door, make his money before that snake dies on him and he loses his opportunity. It's just, I don't know. It's disgusting to me. It really is. I have this like dream in my head of having this like one reptile show a year somewhere centrally located. Being here in Texas, I am like thinking about like Dallas or Austin, something with a good airport, people can fly in, and like hand pick the vendors, do a big room, high diversity of species, and get tens of thousands of people through the door, and have this be the show of all of our dreams, where just you look around, you're like, wow, this show is 15% ball pythons, 15% crested geckos, 10% boa constrictors, 10% monitor lizards, 10% rare gecko species, and pythons like scrubs or carpets or green trees, and turtles and tortoises, and all the best examples from people who are doing it at the highest level. That's like the pipe dream to me of just the ultimate show of venomous room with the best venomous breeders in the country, coming together to show their best stuff off and, sell to customers who are good keepers that love what they do, love the animals, want to treat them properly, have respect for them. I think it's an entirely possible concept. Is it extremely far-fetched? Yeah, absolutely. Will it happen? Probably not, but it could. I mean, it could. The vendors exist for it. The potential customers or just show attendees exist for it. The circumstances just don't. And that's what sucks. And it sucks that a lot of what's going on actively would retract from those things being possible. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's not really a conclusion to it. It's just a whole lot of different ideas. I wrote a few things down. Let me see if I missed anything major in what I wanted to say. Yeah, not really. So I don't know if for anyone who listened to this, and I'm thank you to everyone who listened live. This is probably the most live listeners I've had maybe since the first episode, which I'm kind of surprised by. I didn't really know what to expect because it was just me ranting with no pictures. But hey, this is cool. I'm very grateful for everyone who tuned in. I just think the more of these conversations that we can have, the more that viewpoints that don't necessarily reflect the current dogma, the current status quo, the more this occurs, the more we can get to a place where the industry is in a better standing, where we have a better public image when it comes to legislation or even just public opinion in general, not even worrying about animal rights and legislation, to where the experience of being a new keeper can be bolstered, can be greater than it is now, to where as a breeder you can attract more high quality customers, more high quality people that are interested in what you're doing, to where we keep pushing this whole thing forward and not just kind of sit in a state of mediocrity and accept it, to where we think about what's next, what's the next big thing that is a possibility. So I don't know, couple of topics that I have been thinking about for a long time. I had no idea that I would be able to do an hour 40 of this. So cool. Fun. Yeah, my niche very well may be a solo rant. Yeah, I mean, sure, I'm down for that. I'll be the Tim Dillon of reptiles. I hope even one person understands that reference. But yeah, if there's any other topics that anyone wants me to talk about, shoot me a message. Be like, hey, talk about this. I'm like, yeah, cool. This is nice. So yeah, and the second conversation, there might be more to it at some point. Might even be episodes where I talk about it with friends or whatever. So I just think the more that we can keep innovation on the forefront of the mind, how do we make things even 5-10% better, might end up happening. So, all right, well, to not go in circles anymore, I'll wrap this up. So thank you to everybody who tuned in live. Thank you to everybody listening or watching after the fact. Please give us a subscribe here on the Trap Talk Reptile Network. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your audio content from. Give us a 5-star review on any of those audio sites. All that good stuff. Share us on your pages and all that. Anything that anyone wants to do to help, we are greatly appreciative of that. All right, I'm officially getting tired now, so let's definitely wrap up. But with that said, there is a new podcast every single day of the week here on the network from a wide variety of hosts talking about all sorts of different topics from within the reptile industry. So if this is what you're into, if you want reptile content, there is never a shortage of that. For me, you can find me on Instagram at Scrub Shepherd. You can find me on Facebook at Stephen Kush. Well, not at, just Stephen Kush on Facebook. And you can catch me every Wednesday here talking about whatever whatever I think is interesting at the time. With, had a lot of great guests so far, and will be a lot of great guests in the future. But with all of that said, thank you to everybody for tuning in tonight, and we will see you again next week.